So thank you everybody for being here today. Thank you to Julia for being here as well. My name is Simon Chadwick. I am Professor of Eurasian Sport at EMLYON Business School. As many of you will already know, I'm based in Paris and Shanghai. And I think one of the things that unites the places that I work is Formula E, which has held races in China, but obviously holds a race in France, as we know. Now, I'm really excited to have Julia here with us today. I deliberately targeted her. This wasn't an accident. I deliberately targeted her. And I deliberately targeted her because I know of her reputation as someone working in a really important field in an area of sustainability. And I think for me personally, sustainability is the most important challenge facing sport at the moment. We're obviously going to talk about sustainability in the context of motorsport. And some of you may be asking, well, hey, you know, cars and circuits and tires, and that raises some very interesting issues around sustainability. And hopefully Julia can help shed some light and provide some insights into Formula E and what Formula E is doing. I suspect, Julia, we may get some questions about extreme E as well, probably, which I'm also interested to talk about. So, you know, Julia, great professional, sustainability, really, really important. A lot of people think that I'm a football guy, but don't tell anyone. I've also got this kind of secret kind of interest in motorsport, but don't share that with anyone. I don't want them to know that because I'm normally the football guy. So for me, Julia, sustainability, motorsport, perfect ingredient. Welcome, Julia. I'm not going to say too much more. What I do like to do, Julia, with these webinars, as always, is to just to get you to introduce yourself. And in particular, I know that we've got students here today who are thinking, wow, what a great job. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how did you get to where you are now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So, I mean, as Simon introduced myself, I'm currently Sustainability Director at Formula E. I mean, my role basically consists in developing, a sound strategy in terms of environmental protection, social inclusivity, and economic prosperity for the championship. So this is the real holistic view of what sustainability need to be and should be, not only about obviously protecting the planet and trying to impact people positively, but how to make sure that the business that we run in is also kind of like, benefiting from this sustainability approach and the value that we create through it. So indeed, quite a fascinating mix in between sustainability and motorsport. And just to give a bit of a background on myself, I also did a business school. That's actually quite nice and funny for me to be here back to where I was a few years ago. And I did specialize in sustainability and business management. And after that, I worked for a couple of years for Michelin in the motor racing division. So from the tire perspective, where I implemented a sustainability strategy for them. And then I was recruited by Formula E, to do the same. So that's in a nutshell where I am and where I'm coming from.
Okay, maybe as we get towards the end of the webinar, and especially for the students in the room, perhaps you could tell us a little more about what you think you need to make it in motorsport. And I know that one of my students in particular, who's on the webinar today, she definitely wants to work in motorsport. So I think she would find that useful. Before we get there, though, if I could start off with Formula E generally, as I said, as a closet motorsports fan, I'm aware of what it is and what makes it different to other forms of motorsport. But for those of us who are perhaps unfamiliar or need to know a little more, how do you typically explain Formula E? What is it? What does it do? And how is it different to other forms of motorsport?
So basically, formally is all electric cars, single seaters. So kind of like, I mean, those that you see similar to the F1 cars, racing inner cities. So that's the key differentiator. They're all electric and we are always racing inner city. And the reason why is because we've been created to advance electrification and electric technology to help transitioning to smart mobility in cities. So, I mean, we know that there's a multitude of issues in cities, and that's why they need to transform and to become smart. And one of the key issues is the air pollution that we are unfortunately breathing in big cities. So electric cars are one of the key solutions to help reduce the emissions that are causing the air pollution.
So how do you as sustainability director make that connection between pollution in city, or improving the position of pollution in cities and what you do?
So, I mean, basically, we have a sort of like three key area of focus within the championship. The first focus is to make sure that everything that we deliver as an event, because ultimately the races are events, is going to be looked at through the sustainability lenses, mainly in terms of the environmental impact. And this encompasses all these, measures to reduce the air pollution around the city generated by ourselves. We've done some studies where we've looked at, notably in Paris, where we've looked at 2 weeks before the race, a week before the race, on race day, where we see the air quality dramatically improving while we are around, because the cars are electric and we are diverting the traffic around the city. So this is actually, amazing to see that the technology is proving effective. And then we go on to the next level, which is how we use Formula to impact positively the ecosystem that we work in, so the local communities, the host cities, and so on. And there we bring on some conferences, we bring on some students or school kids at the track, where we kind of like educate them on what is going on and why Formula is way more than a race. So we bring on this concept of, air quality and the importance and the benefit of electric vehicles. And then beyond that, the last level is how Formula is utilizing its global platform to raise awareness on these topics. And we create documentaries. We obviously use the races as one of the key vehicles for that. We also create, infographic on social media and so on. So that's the 3-level approach that we use to link up, the racing and the reason.
Mm-hmm. Can I, before continuing with our discussion about the environment, could I just take a little bit of a step back? One of the things that strikes me about Formula E is the innovativeness of the series. And what caught my attention, I guess, specifically several years ago, was the fan boost facility. So can you tell us a little bit about fan boost? Because I think possibly some people still are unaware of what it is and how it works, but are there other areas of innovation in general that you think it is worth highlighting?
Yeah, so definitely Fan Boost is a great innovation because it's a real interaction with our fans. So this is basically the ability for all fans to vote for their favorite drivers and to give them an extra power boost for their cars. And this will be activated during the race. So there's 3 winners, so the 3 favorite driver of the fans, and they have the availability to push on a button, literally, and to get an extra boost of power for a couple of seconds. But this can mean kind of like a decisive overtake in the race. There is another kind of like innovation that we introduced, which is attack mode. And in attack mode, basically all the drivers have to go in a curve and will get, again, like an extra boost of power, and we'll have to use that extra boost of power strategically to, again, kind of like win the race, overtake someone, or being able to kind of like get 1 lap more ahead of its competitors. So, we've always tried to introduce within the sport some innovative technologies that are also linked with the interaction and kind of like, getting out of the pure sporting performance, but linking to the technology and linking to our fans that could really kind of like influence, the final outtake, the final decision and the final result of the race. Because we believe that we're seeing this trend of gamification, and this is important that this is reflected in the sport today, because this is what our fans are expecting.
You mentioned the word gamification there. What do you see as being gamification for people who are unfamiliar with this term?
Well, the gamification is, I think it's two things. And again, I'm certainly not the expert in gamification, but there's on one way, the opportunity of being someone external, but to interact in the product, whether it's a game, whether it's a sport and so on. So basically having your external view coming in, and also being able to, visualize what is happening in the race as to a video game, literally. So, I mean, seeing some infographics popping in, or seeing these kind of like a visualization of the fan boost appearing on top of the cars and so on. So there's these two elements that I see kind of like working in parallel.
Mm-hmm. So obviously this year has been a very different year for you. So can you talk us through how Formula E has reacted or responded to the pandemic situation? Because I think this has obviously been pretty unique in many ways.
Yes, I mean, obviously it's been a very tough year for everyone around the world. I mean, our sport has been impacted, of course, but we've been, I mean, lucky enough to have a very resilient team, to be honest. So I would say that we had kind of like two phases, the kind of like the reaction and then the proactivity towards COVID. So in the reactive phase, we basically had to stop all the racing for a couple of months, so which canceled more or less half of the season that was due to happen with the European races, the Asian races, and so on. And I mean, obviously, we needed to stay in touch with our fans. We needed to keep engaging with our, racing drivers, still to give visibility for our partners. So we developed a virtual gaming series called Race at Home Challenge. And Race at Home really kind of like was used as a sort of kind of like, plan B racing that we were able to offer to the racing teams. All the racing drivers were participating. And in parallel, because of the COVID, obviously being such a dramatic moment for the international scene, we did a partnership with UNICEF, and we activated the UNICEF partnership within Race at Home. So UNICEF was constantly being promoted within Race at Home, and through Race at Home, we were able to create awareness on the impact that COVID was having on children, because it's true that we see a lot in hospital, probably older people, but children have been also massively impacted because they're not going to school, or because their families are being sick or going to hospital, and because also they can't play. So, that was the reactive phase. And then proactively, we, set up 6 races in a row on 9 days in Berlin in a bubble location. So we normally host our Berlin race in Tempelhof, which is an old airport, so already a segregated area. And we did organize these races, back to back in a way, in order to, first of all, deliver from a sporting perspective, the final, excitement from the season, and to be able also to test in parallel COVID protocols, because we knew that unfortunately this would not kind of like, this would last longer than, the summer. So we've kind of like piloted in parallel this event where we had probably 5 times less people on site. Only the sporting and purely operational people came in. And we had, put together a very complex COVID protocol in partnership with the German authorities, which of course in the world are quite well known for the strict and rigorous approach to health protocols in general, which was put in place.
Okay. At this point, Julia, I've actually got 2 questions. Anton Kliszewski, I'm going to come back to your question in just a moment. That's a challenging one.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Amir Saad to begin with. He's asking, one question is, what do you think is the brand image of Formula E in the market?
Well, I know what we want to be perceived as, and clearly, the vision of Formula E is to accelerate electric vehicles, but to bring better futures. I think that's the key message. So we want to be seen as a brand that has a purpose, and clearly that's why we've been created. It's not that the world needed another racing series, and we want that purpose to be perceived as to accelerating human progress in the right direction of sustainability.
Mm-hmm. And from the analysis that you've done, from the numbers that you're getting, do you think you are progressing in the right way, that you're progressing in the way that you want to?
Well, I mean, absolutely. If you look at two different parameters, the technology, first of all, because I mean, motor racing can only be justified if it pushes the technology. So the technology development within Formula E has been huge, because one of the particularities that we have is that the gap, let's say, that is traditionally called gap in between the track and the road, so the technology transfer from the racing car to the passenger car, is quite close, is quite minimal. So we are able to basically kind of like deploy technologies and implement them on the next day, or kind of like on the next month, from the car manufacturers. And just to give you a couple of examples, Jaguar, who has been one of the teams that joined us at the very beginning of the championship, the I-Pace SUV that they developed is directly taking technology that they developed in the garage, in the Formula E racing garage. We also managed to double the battery capacity in just 4 seasons, which is huge given the range anxiety that we know the world was experiencing in the past. On the other front, there's the growth in terms of the popularity that we're getting within the car manufacturers that are joining us. So the different kind of like competitors. Formula E is actually the biggest lineup to date in motorsport, in international motorsport, of car manufacturers. So we have all the German automotive manufacturers: Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Porsche. We have Nissan, we have DS, we have Mahindra, who is an Indian manufacturer, NIO, a Chinese manufacturer, and so on. So, this basically speaks for itself in terms of the opportunity that car manufacturers are seeing to develop their own technology. And last but not least, also the increase in terms of fans and followers that we have on site, on social media, on the website, which is, constantly going up and up.
We talked before the webinar started about how we always learn from such things, and I wrote this down: range anxiety, which is a new phrase for me. As you may know, today or last night in the United Kingdom, it was announced that all petrol and diesel vehicles will be phased out by 2030. So I think already I'm suffering from range anxiety. So that was good that you mentioned that. I am going to come to you, Anton, in the end. I'm first going to go to Maxime, though. And Maxime is asking, is the long-term objective of Formula E to replace Formula One?
Well, we've not been created to compete with each other. Our targets are very different. Formula E has been created to advance electrification. Formula One has been created to be the pinnacle of motorsport in terms of kind of like, let's say, the petrol side of technology. We also have very different audiences. Formula E is appealing to a much younger audience that is really interested in sustainability, that is keen to try and, give its contribution to make the world a better place, whereas Formula One is clearly targeting probably kind of like older people, wealthier people that are here probably for the fun and the VIP feeling. So I'd say that we are, and effectively we are sister organizations because we are owned by the same shareholders ultimately. We are here to coexist in a way.
Mm-hmm. But do you foresee at any stage in the future a convergence in what the two of you are doing?
So I think that the two championships can bring different different solutions on different time scales. Formula E is obviously working on the electric solution, and we know that this is the future that is anticipated by several think tanks, the McKinsey, kind of like the Boston Consulting Groups, and so on. We know that this is the big trend, but to get there, we need also to kind of like to have the existing fleets of cars kind of like being more sustainable by itself. And F1 is clearly working on kind of like more efficiencies with the petrol cars, whether it's through biofuels and so on. So there's kind of like two different reasons why we probably need each other in a way.
I've got a question from Aristide, which is, nowadays the problem with electric cars is the battery, the lifetime recyclability, and so forth. And I guess there is this notion of range anxiety, which we now know about. How are you dealing with this? What contribution are you making to addressing range anxiety and addressing the development of battery technology and obviously connecting to road car use, so that in the end we all are freely and willingly and without worry using battery powered cars? What does that mean for Formula E?
So, I mean, we've decided to take a kind of like a closed approach in the sense that the battery technology is, is not open for development. So normally in motorsport, you have opportunities to compete on kind of like customizing your cars and your powertrain and so on. The battery within Formula E is the same literally for every single team, which means that the technology, and the effort to develop it are a common effort. And that's how we've been able to double the battery capacity a few seasons ago, because it's not that everyone was competing to advance its own technology. It's everyone was kind of like working all together to advance the same technology that everyone was using. So that was for us the most effective way and also cost effective to advance the technology and make sure that it would not be the one that has the biggest money on the table that would be able to win, hence to keep the technology for itself, because we wanted basically the technological advancement to be widespread and trickle down through the entire automotive industry.
Okay. Anton, Amar, I will get to your question in the end. I'm kind of neatly sidestepping it because it is a little controversial, but I do want to come back to it, and I will ask the question. If I could go to Qingjin Song, if I may. They're asking, when you hold a race in a city, does it mean that you need to ask for permission to use the roads? Or do you just hold on a circuit in a stadium in a city? So, I mean, I guess talk us through the process of, okay, Paris or Sanya or wherever else it is. What does that involve in terms of raising it as an idea and ultimately hosting it as a race there?
Well, very good question. It's highly complex to organize a race in a city, in Paris or in Hong Kong. We had a race a few years ago. Basically, we absolutely need the local city officials and sometimes even the local government, support in making sure that we will be able to close off the streets, to make the necessary works, to put in place the security fencing and so on, and also to put the show, the grandstands and so on. So this means a lot of, temporary infrastructure that need to come in the city, and obviously to disrupt also the city, because being French, knowing very well that Parisians don't like to be asked not to park where they are used to park for a couple of weeks, that's quite hard for them to swallow the pill. So that's also why we put in place some community engagement plans, so that they feel that they are also kind of like VIPs in their own in their own city and for this specific event that they are being impacted by.
Okay. My student is here. I told you she's here. So Yi, who is a huge motorsport fan, she's one of my master's students. She wants to hear your views on China as a venue for a race, China as a marketplace, and she also makes reference to a Chinese team competing in Formula E. So can we get your views on China in general?
So China is very important to us. We have a local promoter in China, which means that we have a regional partner that has both the rights to organize Formula E events in the whole region. So first of all, to showcase the importance that this region has for us, we know that in terms of electric vehicle market, this is one of the most dynamic markets in the world, and also one that has adopted electric vehicles the fastest. We do also have strong link, on the grid in the racing teams. We have NIO, a Chinese team, and also we have Cheetah, which is also owned by Chinese investors. So we are, obviously actively looking for, cities to race in China. Unfortunately, last season due to COVID, we had to cancel our event. And we also kind of used to have a race in Hong Kong. So China is and kind of like the whole Asian region is very much of big focus for us. Also, especially because we have lots of fans in China and in the region that really love Formula E, and that we would love to be able to bring the show at their doors.
Okay, so there are so many questions. We'll go with Alexis. Alexis is big fan of cars, really enjoyed listening to you. Do you foresee a Netflix type documentary series about Formula E?
We had one already called And We Go Green. Alexi, if you want to have a look. And we're clearly working on similar concepts in the near future. But yeah, we had one on the creation of Formula E, steering our founder and kind of like the former CEO of Formula E, Alejandro Agag, so that the person that came up with the idea together with the FIA, the International Federation of Automotive. And that's basically the story of kind of like writing a few ideas on a napkin in a Parisian restaurant to delivering the first events, and basically recruiting cities, recruiting racing drivers, recruiting car manufacturers to come in and join this crazy and cool idea.
Alexis is also asking, given all of our mutual connections with Lyon, could you ever imagine Lyon hosting a Formula E race?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is something we can look into. We are definitely looking at major cities that have a huge interest or kind of like or a keen interest in terms of, I mean, mobility and developing its own kind of like a mobility plan, having a clear agenda in terms of transitioning to a smarter and more sustainable way of moving. And absolutely, we are looking at kind of like all major cities around the world, Lyon being definitely one.
We have Sebastian, and Sebastian's taking us in the direction of Extreme E. So I think at this point we can introduce Extreme E into the conversation. So tell us a little bit more about Extreme E, especially as it's new and many people may not know anything about it.
So Extreme E is the sister organization of Formula E. It was created by the same founder. So our former CEO is now the CEO of Extreme E, Alejandro Agag. And Extreme E is basically having the same purpose. I mean, trying to advance electrification and basically fighting climate change. But they are taking a different segment. So they are using all electric SUVs as kind of like racing cars. But these electric SUVs are basically, I mean, models that you can buy more or less in a shop. They're a bit customized for the racing safety purpose, but you find these SUVs, I mean, already on the streets. And these SUVs are racing in remote corners of the planet because we are trying to find locations that are iconic of climate change. So that have been already impacted by climate change or that have been impacted by human activity that is in turn triggering more climate change. So just to give you an example, we are racing in Brazil, in a part of Amazonia that has been destroyed already by human activity. And that is, of course, kind of like increasing all the problem of deforestation, all the problems linked to, carbon sequestration and so on.
How do you make sure that in a place like Amazonia that you're not contributing or exacerbating existing problems?
So we each time work with local organizations. So for example, in Brazil, we work with the Nature Conservancy, which is a well-known and well-established organization, and they do environmental impact assessment. Sorry, it's a bit technical, but they basically do kind of like a study on site to make sure that where we are planning to race, there won't be any kind of like further damage being caused by our presence. So is there a bird nesting in there that we would disrupt? Is there kind of like a frog that is kind of like, crossing the track where we want to race? And we make sure that this is not happening. And also in turn, we always make sure that whenever we race, we will impact positively the local communities and we leave legacy programs. So it can vary a lot. Some kind of like incentive program for local farmers to grow new tree species that are more favorable to biodiversity in Amazon, or kind of like a mangrove planting program in Senegal. It varies to the local context each time.
So there are lots of questions coming in. So I'm trying to juggle these questions and I still want to come back to certain things. Obviously, we have the likes of Lewis Hamilton, who will be involved in Extreme
Absolutely.
E. So one of the things I want to know is how important do you think somebody like Lewis Hamilton is to the series? But also I want to connect it to a question that has come in from Matthew Mack, and he's asking about gender diversity in motorsport. So, I mean, obviously one of the things that Lewis Hamilton is very passionate about is diversity in motorsport, but Matthew's asking about it on a gender basis too. Again, from a Formula E perspective, where do you stand on diversity?
So, I mean, diversity and especially gender diversity has always been a very important, issue for us. We already kind of like started 3 years ago a dedicated program together with our federation called Girls on Track. And the aim of that program was to bring young girls coming from different social backgrounds on our family events, give them a day of workshop on what a career in motorsport can look like. You can be a presenter, so you do journalism, you can be an engineer, you can become a mechanic, or you can become a racing driver. We always had karting tracks for the girls to test and see if they were kind of like enjoying it and talented at it. And that program really aims to kind of like identify on the grassroots level the STEM topic opportunities and kind of like open their minds and show that there's no glass ceiling in the racing sphere. As an organization, also Formally is taking that very seriously. Probably most of the C-level team is actually women and also coming from different kind of like social backgrounds and kind of like cultures. So this is highly important.
Okay, another one from Qingjin, who's asking, what about Tesla?
Tesla, it's a question that often comes back. So basically, Tesla is not, with us because that technology and the way that this company has been developed is around batteries. And because battery is the only component that we don't open for competition, they are not finding the assets that obviously would make them stand out and probably win if they were in. So we do understand that Tesla basically is not kind of like so appealed by your product so far. However, we've been in kind of like conversation since a long time with them, and we're definitely looking for the best opportunity to get them involved, maybe on a different kind of like technological improvement that we could be developing together on the cars.
Okay. Yusuf is asking about the cost of a race. Can you kind of give some sort of ballpark figure as to what a race typically costs to stage?
So, to be fair, it varies hugely from one race to another. There are obviously different ways of kind of like setting up the business model of a race. But definitely a race is a couple of millions. This is for sure a minimum.
Shayamal, I'm guessing, is either from or is in India and is asking about India, especially because India is trying to go 100% electric for its vehicles by 2030. Any thoughts on India?
Yeah, well, India also a hugely important market for us. We had since the beginning an Indian team, Mahindra, that has been, I think with us since day one, and that is also highly successful. So clearly India is, very much high on our list to try and get there for a race. Again, as I was saying, for China, it's also where we have quite a lot of fans. Indian people are really keen and really interested in Formula E. So hopefully more to come in the next few months or years with an Indian race.
Interesting question from Yusuke Yamanaka, who is asking, was there anything outside motorsport, certainly outside Formula E, that you used as a benchmark or as a reference point, or that you specifically drew from in environmental and sustainability terms? So, was there a particular industry or a particular product or a particular sector that caught your attention?
Well, there are definitely a lot of, great best practices that are happening in the sport industry or outside of the sport industry. I'm always very inspired by what the Ocean Race, formerly the Volvo Ocean Race, are doing. And I think in general, what all the sports within the World Sailing Federation are doing. They are clearly kind of like a really kind of like, they have a very mature approach and a very kind of like a sophisticated approach to environmental protection and sustainability in general, which I find, always really interesting. However, Formula E is very specific. Motorsport is very peculiar, and Formula E within motorsport is really unique. Delivering 14 events on 6 months, temporary in 14 different cities is a challenge. I think that we are probably closer to a circus operation than a motorsport, because normally motorsports race on existing tracks.
Can I flip that and ask you the question, what would you hope that other sports and other industries are learning from you?
Well, I think that the most important that they could learn from us is that, I mean, where you are taking sustainability seriously and strategically, you have a real game changer and a real USP for your company, which is going to become probably kind of like the in or out, decision making for the future of sports. I think that tomorrow, sports that want to embrace sustainability, but on the strategic perspective, what will the sport bring to the world, to people and the planet, rather than a good moment in front of TV, will be detrimental for their survival.
Thank you. Just a couple to maybe three more. Hydrogen.
Yeah.
A question: is there anything around? So, is there anything to consider concerning the use of hydrogen in Formula E? That's from Sebastian.
Yes, absolutely. Hydrogen is a very important one. We are definitely looking into hydrogen for, our events, to power our events on hydrogen, and maybe also to power our cars. I just want to be, take a second to confirm that hydrogen is just a different way of generating electricity. So, the technology of the cars would remain the same. It's just that we would charge the cars with hydrogen, and hydrogen generated with renewable energy sources.
Okay. Margot, I will ask you a question, Margot, but I'm not sure I understand what it is. So if you could redraft your question and repost it for me, Margot, that would be helpful. I'm going to go to VS, who observes that you obviously have one race already in Saudi Arabia. Something that I'm very interested in is the Gulf region in the Middle East. Do you have any other plans for further races in the Gulf region?
Same, we're definitely in discussions with people in that region. Obviously, kind of like a huge opportunity because these are markets that are ready to jump to electrification, and there's a huge kind of like governmental will to try and push their citizens to adopt electrification. So obviously, huge opportunities for us in these markets.
Okay, that kind of leads us on to Saudi Arabia. And there have been a couple of observations around Saudi Arabia, and one of the questions is around what challenges did you face in going to Saudi Arabia? But then Anton Klishchevsky is asking around the reputation that Saudi Arabia has internationally. Yeah. What particular issues and challenges does this pose for you?
Well, I would say that we had probably kind of like similar issues in other parts of the world to get there from the pure technical perspective, like to deliver a race there. Certainly it was the first time that, the kingdom was opening up to an external type of event. I believe that we were the first international event that they were hosting. Rather than the challenges, I'm really interested to share with you also kind of like the surprises that we found on site. So we were the first international event to organize something in Saudi Arabia, but most importantly, we were the first international concert where they were allowing men and women to mix. And we had these amazing scenes because we had concerts for 2 or 3 days in a row, where the first day people were relatively, standing apart and not really kind of like, dancing and so on, like I think having fun, but in a very kind of like strict way. 2 days after, people dancing like foolish on, like in front of the stage. So it's been really interesting to see how, obviously kind of like the local government, because they wanted to be able to host that race, as enabled to open, some new opportunities to their population. Another kind of like amazing thing that happened, on site, was the fact that just a few months ago, just a few months before we were actually hosting the first race in Saudi Arabia, they had changed the legislation to allow women to drive. And we actually had, so after some of the races, we have what we call rookie tests. So where our teams are basically kind of like giving the cars to young drivers that have the opportunity to test and see if they have, they are skilled to potentially become kind of like a full-time driver in an upcoming race or in an upcoming season. And we did a rookie test only with women in Saudi Arabia, with obviously the support of the government, again, to send a very strong message to, their women citizens that, driving was permitted, and that, that was now something that they could do, and they were encouraged to do. So, clearly, I totally understand where you're coming from, but I'm also kind of like really emotional when I think about all these, young people that I've had that I've had the right to go to a concert, that I've had the right to dance together, and seeing these women driving around the track.
Yeah, for the first time earlier this year, Julia, I visited Riyadh, and it was not what I expected. And what I would say to anybody is be careful how your preconceptions and stereotypes control you, because they're not always correct or accurate. I think there are big changes taking place in Saudi Arabia, and it's important to acknowledge that. I have a list of questions, Julia. We talked about this when we rehearsed earlier in the week. I've got a set of questions. I think my set of questions is completely redundant. You've this webinar is like no other webinar, where essentially I've not really asked questions. The audience have asked questions. So you've done an amazing job in motivating people to send questions in. So just to go back through. Another one from Sebastian, and he's asking specifically, he's trying to pin you down.
Okay.
He's asking specifically about gender equality in Formula E.
Yes.
So he's asking, is there any news about gender equality in Formula E?
So, it depends, because I think I already pointed the fact that as an organization, Formula E is already there. Most of kind of like the C-level team, so the top management is probably beyond 50% of women occupying key roles. Definitely on the track, this is something that we're working hard with the teams, but also we want, then obviously you can disagree. It's one of the topics that we can agree to disagree. We are working hard with the teams for them to identify women and female talents. However, we want to give kind of like the best seats to people that deserve it from their ability to drive, and not putting someone in a difficult situation that would have been appointed because she's a female, and not having all these potential skills to be able to perform. So, we are developing basically what we call kind of like a program to help from grassroots to, the Formula E level, young and diverse talent to access to motorsport. But this is kind of like something that is not exactly for tomorrow, let's say for after tomorrow. So that's all I can say, Sebastian.
Okay. Matthew Mack is asking, what does Formula E want? What does Formula E want to achieve through its air quality map program?
Well, I think we want to achieve the awareness, first of all. Most of the people are not conscious that they are breathing, bad air quality, and they are not also aware of the dramatic consequences it has on their health. And then obviously with that collective awareness, this really kind of like pushes people to try and think about the way that they use transport, and think about the way they live their daily lives to, approach basically more sustainable behaviors.
Margot is asking, she's redrafted her question. She's asking, and let me frame this in a particular way. Given that India wants to go completely electric by 2030, Britain wants to go completely electric by 2030, you have Norway going completely electric by 2030. On that basis, isn't Formula One going to die? And shouldn't Formula One just do what you're already doing?
Well, they are working on kind of like very much revamping also their own approach to the sport, also from the technical perspective, trying to introduce more sustainable technologies to the cars. And as I said, there's this kind of like this two-step approach where even if countries will not sell any more, petrol or diesel cars, there will still be the existing cars that will be kind of like probably millions of fleets, depending on the countries that you're looking at, which still needs in a way to kind of like find either a second life or an end of life that will be acceptable. And that's where I can see F1 kind of being able to make the last contribution of what the future of petrol car and diesel cars can look like in a more sustainable way.
Mm-hmm. We have one from Ryan, which is, what is the goal around car performance? Is the goal to increase lap times or to promote entertainment?
So, I mean, car performance is always a key focal point. However, in car performance, what we are really focusing for the next, let's say the next years, is actually ultra fast charging. Because after the range anxiety, we are tackling the kind of like the following issue, which is the problem that we are, first of all, lacking enough car charging points in cities, and they are too slow. So this is what we are actually focusing the efforts for the new generation of our cars.
Okay, Amar, who that's 3 questions, Amar. You're getting greedy. Asking around from the Saudi Arabian side, because obviously you've talked about from your side in Saudi Arabia, but from the Saudi Arabian side, what do you think are the benefits of being associated for the country with Formula E?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, Saudi Arabia also launched kind of like a sort of like a plan to modernize its economy and its society going in parallel. And that's where I see Formula E is playing a role, because they are in a way using us as a sort of guinea pig to test some new kind of like behavior, some new possibilities for its population on the small scale of our event before potentially kind of like scaling that up to the whole society.
Okay. So at that point, there are no further questions from the audience, although we've got about 10 minutes or so left. So if anybody does want to send any more questions, then you're welcome to do that. But I want to ask 2 things before we finish. The first one is about net zero carbon emissions. So obviously you are a net zero carbon emissions sport. I suspect that most of the sports in the world are not, and it will take a long time for them to get there. But can you talk us through what you did to achieve this position of being net zero carbon emitters?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been actually kind of like a long process, which takes us back to the very beginning of the championship, because achieving net zero carbon is not only about kind of like, you know, buying carbon offsetting credits. It's about measuring your emissions consistently. I mean, since the beginning of your activity, it's about putting in place reduction, measures, and then for all the things that you cannot avoid, buying and purchasing carbon credits, and then obviously kind of like buying the right type of carbon credits, because there's it's a very kind of like messy market in a way. So I mean, navigating through these. So I think that the key things to remember is that the end game is not the offsetting per se, it's the reduction. And actually, when we went out with the announcement that we had achieved net zero carbon emissions, backtracking since the very first race and the very first season, we also announced that it was not the end game, but that we were looking at aligning our CO2 emissions as a business. So, I mean, the entire ecosystem that revolves around us. So to align that onto climate science. And we know that's basically more or less what climate science says, is that by 2030, we need to reduce by 50% the emissions. And this is where the business will be able to, I mean, prove and showcase that, not only Formula E is hopefully kind of like having a positive impact on the world in terms of accelerating the transition to, electric vehicles and a more sustainable type of mobility, but as a business purely, we are not kind of like contributing beyond what we can or what the world can sustain in terms of emissions.
So suddenly a whole bunch of questions have just appeared in my. You know what? Take your shoes off and make yourself a coffee, Julia. We're going to be here for a few days.
A while.
Yeah, we're going to be here for a while. I'll try to get through them as quickly as I can, and please do feel free to give short answers if you think it's appropriate. Once the Formula E race has gone, how do you ensure that you continue to have a legacy on that city?
Yes, well, I mean, we put in place programs that are kind of like year-long. For example, education programs in schools. We launched in Italy in 800 schools. In one go, an education program that is trying to showcase sustainability practices to kids, with obviously a focus on transport. So these are kind of like these type of initiatives that enable us to remain connected to the market without being physically in the market for the race.
Okay, that was from Robin, by the way. Yasmin has been really clever because she's posted a question in the Q&A facility, then a completely different one in the chat facility. So that's very, very clever of you, Yasmin. Essentially what she's asking is, is there a central sustainability team, or do individual teams have sustainability teams? And she's also asking who works in these teams. Are they scientists?
So, I mean, you're spot on, Yasmin. There's a central sustainability team that have reps in each and every single team of Formula E, and we do have point of contact in each and every single every single local teams that we work with to organize the races. So, I'm heading, let's say, kind of like the core sustainability team from the central perspective, and then we kind of like we allocate on a goodwill basis whoever wants to be the point of contact in hospitality team, fan zone team, production team, and so on within Formula E. And that's how we operate, and we are able to, keep developing and improving our sustainability programs.
Okay. Baptiste is asking about batteries. What happens to the batteries once their life is over, and what's your policy on waste management in general?
So batteries specifically, the first generation of batteries, they've all been recycled. Working with one of the leaders, the company leading in the world to do that. And now we're looking at a reuse project because we know from the battery perspective that you basically kind of like are much better reusing them before recycling them. So we are working with a couple of universities for a research project, but also very much kind of like a pure energy storage transformation with ourselves. And this is kind of like in the making. And for waste, just in a few words, we have a very comprehensive waste management approach that we kind of like have established on the global level, and that we customize per each country and laws and regulations as to what waste management needs to be in the cities that we race in.
Benoit asks for your power sources. Are you auditing or checking where the power comes from? And he's asking in particular, do you check whether it comes from a nuclear power station or a coal-fired power station? Is there anything of that nature taking place?
Absolutely, this is very important for us. We always try and get power from the grid, and if it's from the grid, either directly through a renewable energy provider. If not, we buy renewable energy certificates. So you basically kind of like buy the exact same amount that is injected into the grid of the country that you've been using the electricity from, but from renewable energy sources.
I'm going to finish soon, but
you never said it will be a marathon.
Oh, gee, I'm tired. I think I need to finish now. My head hurts. I'm looking at two screens and different sections of different screens. I like VS's question about how do you ensure sustainability in your supply chain?
Well, that's a big topic, and that's one of the kind of like recurring key objectives that we have, because it's so broad, and also we have quite a complex set of stakeholders. So we have developed a sustainability procurement policy. We are working on specific initiatives with key suppliers, but also every year we're going a bit more into the nitty and gritty of the local suppliers. So ongoing efforts from that perspective.
Okay, Shayamal is asking about sponsors.
Yes.
In particular, he observes an uptick in sponsorship, as he puts it. What kind of sponsors are you attracting, and why do you think you're attracting them?
Clearly, the sponsors are coming for the sustainability credentials of the series, because they want to try and kind of like showcase their own solutions sustainability wise, and use Formulae as a platform to do so. I mean, if you look at our kind of like a sponsorship ecosystem, we work with insurance companies, we work with banking companies, logistic companies, and so on. Quite a B2B set of sponsors also.
Okay. Alexis asks a really interesting question, which I'm going to ask in a slightly different way, but what's your view? We've obviously talked about batteries and emissions and pollution in that context, but what are your views on, what's your position on noise pollution and visual pollution? Because obviously in terms of noise, you're bringing cars and trucks and whatever else into the city, and in terms of visual pollution, you're obviously taking over cities and erecting barriers and so forth. What's your position on this?
Yes, I mean, that's true. I mean, we are an event, absolutely. However, definitely in terms of both economic and social, like well-being impact that is generated by our event, it massively overweights I mean, the potential noise and the visual pollution that we are generating. But that's a good point. I mean, probably kind of like it would not change much in terms of the noise pollution in the city, because the traffic would remain the same. We're actually reducing traffic. In terms of the visual pollution, there's obviously kind of like fences and kind of like trackside branding and so on. But I mean, it's basically for a day.
Kevin Lee has just sent one in, and I'm going to Kevin's question, and then maybe one last question from me, and then we'll leave it at that. Otherwise, we could be here for days and days and days and days, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. Do you have a strategic development plan to engage and connect to communities to promote growth, sustainability, and development? Absolutely.
We have a strategic community engagement plan, and that's exactly the point. I mean, to showcase the benefits that Formulae as an ecosystem can bring to them.
Yeah, and he's particularly asking about deprivation. Do you think you are making or can make a contribution to addressing deprivation?
Yes, I mean, either kind of like directly or indirectly, we do work on that. We very often partner with local charities and make donations to these local charities to operate in the local community, to try and kind of like, establish, let's say, kind of like a fairer or kind of like a benefits from the economic perspective to these local communities. An example in New York, where we race in Red Hook, which is one of the poorest areas in the US. In Red Hook, we make sure that we employ every year local residents to make sure that there's a kind of like a direct positive impact from the race in the local economy, and kind of like very clearly financially for these people that are our neighbors.
Mm-hmm. And a final question from me. What does the future hold? What can we expect from Formula E?
Well, I think you can expect a lot more innovations. I think that's really the essence of Formula E. We've been created for this. I mean, we are on a mission. That's always been the point and why we've been created. I mean, definitely also we want to do more in terms of sustainability. As I said, I think the climate science alignment is one of the facets that is going to be kind of like the work for the next few years for us. Clearly, more to come in terms of diversity and inclusion. Also from that perspective, this is extremely important to us, and that kind of like aligns perfectly with what also our fans are expecting. So from the car and the technical perspective, in 2 years' time, we will reveal a new version of our car. We call that generation 3 of the car, which will be kind of like faster and cooler with the ultra fast charging, and also more sustainable as a car. We're working on that.
I would like to take some more questions, but we've been going for an hour, and I know that you're a busy woman, Julia. So at this point, I'm not going to take any more. Can I just firstly thank you, Julia, really, for being so open and so direct in answering the questions. Can I also thank the audience? I think this has been the most lively audience for any of the webinars that we've done. And I think what's been really great is that the interactive nature of the webinar is just, for me, it's just been fantastic. And as I say, I've not asked, I only had a list of about 5 or 6 questions, and I've not asked half of them. So, you know, I think that's testament to the length and the quality of your answers, Julia, but also, as I say, the enthusiasm of the audience. So can I thank you, Julia? Can I thank the audience? Can I also thank Anna and 16 for arranging another brilliant webinar? We'll have to go and we'll have to do this again. We'll do this. We'll do this again. But next time, bring coffee and biscuits, and we can sit
absolutely.
And we'll sit and chat for a lot longer. Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. But thank you really. I'm really grateful, and thank you for doing this. So stay safe, everyone. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.